All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here right at 8 p.m. We'll give people plenty of time to hop in. We had 100 and I think close to 150 people registered. So we'll see how many show up for the live bit and how many are tuning in for the replay. If you're listening into the replay, hello, welcome. My name is Rob Phelan. This is Doug Nordman. We'll do another formal introduction in a couple of minutes, but Doug is the author of a really great book that is focused on the parent side. So what I really liked about Doug's book is that it kind of pairs nicely with M's for Money. So you have this how to raise, I'm going to get this title wrong, how to raise your money savvy family for next generation financial independence. It's a mouthful, but I think I said it right.
Keyword rich.
And it's like this really cool idea for a book where you just got this back and forth between Doug and his daughter Carol. Like, so they each just kind of like split a chapter between them, and you tell it from Doug's perspective, you tell it from Carol's perspective. So Carol is Doug's daughter, and all the way up through her upbringing, they're kind of going back through like all these lessons that Doug and his wife Marge tried to bring into the household, with some with success and some that didn't work out as well as you hope they would. Yeah. I think that's the fun part, is that like not everything's going to work perfectly. We can throw all this advice out here and it will work for some families. It won't work for others because every kid is different. Every family dynamic's different. Every parent is different. So I'm excited to kind of get your perspective and what you think, but how's life going for you?
Oh, it's been pretty good. The surf's been up all week. Weather's been good. It's November, so it's getting a little colder. It's like 70 degrees at night.
Sorry, that must be so hard for you. Yeah, we're starting to get down into like the 40s here. So I'm in Maryland. Doug is in Hawaii. So yeah, Doug's really toughing it out over there. But
we just had a couple of months of travel beforehand. We were on the mainland for FinCon and Camp FI. So it's been nice to come home and get caught up on stuff and just hang out for a while.
And speaking of, Camp FI is where Doug and I first met. So that,
yeah.
Do you want to tell us what Camp FI is, Doug? Well, I'll let you explain what that is.
Yeah, it's all about financial independence, but it's a smaller meetup, and it's generally between 40 to 65, maybe 70 people at a retreat or a conference center somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, with limited bandwidth and maybe not even cell phone service. But Stephen Boyer, the creator of this program, gets everybody together on a Friday night, and you sit and talk over the weekend till Monday morning. Generally, it's a holiday weekend. And the whole idea is to talk about getting to financial independence. And there's a couple of presentations every day, maybe one or two in the morning and maybe another one in the afternoon. But the whole idea is to get people together for a conversation about financial independence, where it's a small meetup and it's personal. And this is for people that want to learn more about financial independence, not just for bloggers and podcasters and videographers. I really enjoy the Camp FI format, because then I get to talk to people. And that book that Carol and I wrote grew right out of those questions that we were asked at Camp FI. We understand financial independence, Nords, but why don't you tell us how you raised your daughter for that?
And I totally agree. And what I liked about Camp FI was I went when I was like, I didn't even start doing anything in the personal finance space at that time. So I was a teacher. I was just starting to think about teaching personal finance, and I come across the financial independence community, and then I heard about this Camp FI thing, and there was one happening in Richmond, Virginia. That's the closest one to me. So I'm on the East Coast, and that's Camp FI Mid-Atlantic. So there's one that's in Florida. There's one that's in Mid-Atlantic, which is Virginia. And I don't even know if there is a Northeast one yet. I don't think there is, right?
Not yet. We've got one up in Minnesota. Haven't been there yet. There's another one in Little Rock, Arkansas, and of course, Texas, Colorado, California. I really like the one in the Mid-Atlantic because it's on the James River. There's stand-up paddleboarding there. That was very nice.
Oh, it was a beautiful location. It's this little retreat center. I was staying in like these little, it was almost like a fenced-in chicken coop. Like it was. It was like what you imagine, like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts went and did when they went camping. Like, so you're staying in these like little like hen houses, basically. It was like totally open to the outdoors, but it was the May Bank holiday weekend, so it was absolutely beautiful, and it was quiet.
For those of us who are a little concerned about the lodging, they do have cabins. We stayed in a very nice cabin. Yeah,
I chose the cheapest option.
Exactly. So, you can do your own, roll your own.
Yeah. So like you'd think that all the cabins would be empty because everyone will be choosing the cheapest option, but no, there's plenty of people who take us up on that.
Yeah.
But if you've never seen these before, I highly recommend checking them out. It's a place where anybody can go and find others who are also thinking about this personal finance question. Like, how do I do it? What's the right path for me? What are some other people doing? Because as we've figured out, and hopefully those of you on the call or watching the replay have figured out, there is no one right way to do this.
Right.
And there's so many voices out there in the personal finance space. So if you listen to one, you're like, that wasn't really for me, don't give up. Go back and try and find others and see if you can find one that does resonate with you, because there are just so many of them that are popping up, and they're doing podcasts, they're doing YouTubing, they're doing blogs, they're doing newsletters. There's a lot of YouTubers that are like really doing some wonderful stuff that, I love seeing their video creations. And then even just like social media personalities. So TikTok is full of good and bad. Instagram, same thing. So like, find the ones that resonate with you and you think are giving good advice. All right, but it is 6 minutes past 8 for me. You're way earlier, but let's get into this. So tonight's presentation is how to raise a responsible money manager. And this is a Kickstarter reward that we unlocked during the Kickstarter campaign for M's for Money. So that happened over the month of July. And this was a stretch goal that after the book was fully funded, I don't remember which stretch goal this was. I think it might've been $10,000 raised. We said we would do a webinar like this for free that anyone who backed the book could attend. Plus we opened it up to the public as well. So if you are a backer of M's for Money and you're listening to this, oh my goodness, thank you so much. That was such an incredible experience. I was very overwhelmed with the support that I got from the personal finance community. And since then, just to give you some stats, like M's for Money went live this morning. So it's now freely available to the public. Before it went live on Amazon, there has been 1,591 copies sold. So that's between the Kickstarter and pre-orders.
Fantastic.
So like I could never have imagined that it was going to be anywhere near this kind of level. My previous book, The Simple Startup, took over a year to sell 1,000 copies, and it's just trickling along since then. So this was totally
you're going to stay up till like 3 a.m. now, just watching your stats and refreshing your Amazon ranking?
I can't get live stats. It like updates every day. So I have no idea what happened today. I don't know if it was crickets or if it was good, but regardless, I am delighted with how M's for Money is doing. And I'm starting to see reviews come in, which is such a, that's such a magical part. Like where you see people saying like, my kid's reading this book and they love it, or they learned this, or they started talking about this. And I'm sure you see a kind of similar thing from parents where they like start implementing some of your ideas and you get that feedback of this worked. My kid actually wants to save. They want to think about their spending, or they start saving their 529 account, or whatever it is. You're probably like, yes, it's a magic moment. All right. So our setup for tonight, we're going to do a couple of different questions that have been popping up. I've asked in several different places, like, what are some questions that you'd like Doug and I to try and answer? I'm going to throw some of the most common questions that we typically get asked, I'm guessing. And then I've got a lot of giveaways for you. So tonight's event is sponsored by GoHenry. So I've got 2 6-month free memberships to GoHenry to give away, which I think is a really intriguing thing. At least 6 months is a great free trial to try something out and see if you like it. I got a couple of books to give away, including M's for Money and Doug and Carol's book. And we're going to have a great time tonight. So Doug, let's kick it off. When's the right time to start talking about money with your kids? So we'll make it a nice. We'll throw you a softball, right?
That's right. In our family, we discovered that when they're still eating money, that's a bad time. So we joke about how you can start teaching your kids about money when they stop eating it. In our case, our daughter, I think she was like 22 months old at the time, played with a quarter, put it in her mouth, started to choke on the quarter. And, as a parent, all those things that they tell you about choking kids, and they're giving a little pat in the back. And, I got a little excited about it, but she choked that quarter and then she spit it right out across the room. And so we knew we weren't ready yet. But I think we were right around 2.5, 3 years old when she first wanted to start playing with coins and bills and learning about money. And so from there, we just started on to the next stage, getting her comfortable with identifying all the coins and the bills and how do you use them.
And my son, like, again, is intrigued by money, wants to play with the piggy bank. Like we have an old piggy bank in our house that was my wife's, I think, growing up. And when we have spare change, we'll put it in there. And I let him put it in, but you have to like watch so close. You almost have to like place it in there with him. Cause like if you turn away for a second, it'll be in his mouth. And he's 2 and 3 months. So not ready yet. But
so there's fine motor skills too. That really helps.
Yeah. Have you noticed now? So you have a granddaughter as well. So you're kind of getting almost a second turn at this a little bit, because I know you spend a lot of time with your granddaughter. And then you also see,
and this time we're going to do it right.
Yeah. Carol's not here, right?
Not as far as I know.
And then you also see Carol, who was that second generation financial independence, and now she's working on third generation. Like, is there anything you can do before they can't be trusted to hold coins? Like, is there any lessons that we can think about even earlier than that?
There are probably things that you can try, and I wouldn't necessarily limit it to a certain age. It's more of a readiness.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if your kid is always putting things in their mouth, well, you're probably not going to test them out on quarters or pennies. But if they do seem interested in playing with small things like poker chips, for example, poker chips are tough to choke on. And if they seem interested and safe around that, well, sure, maybe you'll play around with change. And if they see you at the grocery store or in a shop somewhere and they see you reaching in your pocket and spending actual cash money, which is kind of rare these days, but if they see you doing that and they look interested, then follow that interest. In our case, we were faced with a kid who was always on 24/7, was into everything, wanted to know everything that the grownups were doing, because that's all she wanted to do, was to be a grown-up. They had all the power. And so every time she showed interest in anything we were doing, we just would talk about it and try to get her to get involved in it and do whatever needed to be done. So as soon as she saw us spending money at the grocery store, that was her next question, is getting more interested in that. And eventually we moved on to the next concept, where she got to actually take a dollar bill and buy, one special thing from the grocery store. And you just keep doing that as they show readiness for the next step.
No, I think that's it. Like, it's modeling, it's picking them up when they show an interest and diving into that with them. So,
and you never know when you're raising the next Warren Buffett, or whether you're raising somebody who just doesn't care about money. And so we tried very hard in writing the book to avoid assigning everybody into little age slots.
Mm-hmm.
But, sometime before kindergarten, they're probably ready to start handling money and learning the things. And during elementary school, they're probably ready to start making spending choices and learning how the dollars and the coins work. And, in elementary school, middle school, maybe now they're ready to start learning about saving, and maybe even ready to start learning about investing. But again, follow their interests and don't force it on them. There's a whole bunch of people who write about problems teaching their kids about money because they tried to force it on them without waiting for the kid to be ready.
Yeah, I think one of the other really popular authors in the, I guess, the personal finance community is J.L. Collins, and his most popular book is The Simple Path to Wealth. And The Simple Path to Wealth is essentially the letters / information he was jotting down for his daughter, because when he was trying to teach his daughter about this stuff, she was pushing back and be like, I'm not interested in this, leave me alone. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to at least write this down so that someday, maybe when you are interested, you'll be able to find it. And it's turned into like this amazing best-selling book because it is broken down in such an easy way. And that's actually one of the books I'm going to be giving away later. I forgot to mention that one. So,
and they do get along. I mean, they have reconciled. She's in her 20s now. They're all understanding each other. And she even talks about the lessons that she and he both learned when she was being raised. That was her giving her perspective, not just as the kid who was suffering as a 5 or 6 year old, but also as an adult now who's looking back on those years and understanding what dad was really trying to do.
Mm-hmm. And she was still someone who doesn't want like a very active role in finances. It's very much like, I want to know how to put on autopilot, do my life, and like let my finance do its own thing. I don't want a very like interested large part of my day dedicated to this. And that's totally okay. Your kid does not need to be a money nerd, is like the affectionate term we use for someone who's really into finances. They don't need to be that to do well with their money. Like, there's a lot of things that they can learn, principles that we want to teach our kids that will just help them to be good money managers. And I think our goal probably at the end of the day is not necessarily they're going to be rich, but that they're going to avoid making a lot of the financial mistakes and pitfalls that many of us adults have faced. And if they can do that, they're going to be just fine. They will be financially independent of you someday. And I think that's
that's the whole point is, as teenagers, they become aware that if their parents could achieve financial independence, how hard could it be? And the reality is that a high savings rate overcomes a tremendous number of mistakes along the way. And so when you talk about those things, not just the successes, but the things that you messed up when you were their age, then they have something to compare themselves to and a goal to aspire to.
Yeah. And high savings rate, wonderful. Making good decisions. So not going into a ton of debt, not blowing money on things that are not aligned with their priorities. Like those are things that if we just figure that out at an early age, even a mediocre savings rate from a young age is going to be, this jetpack to financial stability and financial independence in the future. So just learning how to manage what you've got. All right. So we've got 3 years old roughly where they stop eating money and maybe start thinking about like what kind of formal lessons we can do. We've talked about playing with them. We've talked about maybe getting down on the floor and discussing when they're showing an interest. When would you say you start having like actual formal lessons? Did you ever say like, okay, kiddo, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about money today? Or is it something much more subtle than that?
I would say it's a combination of sleep deprivation and many, many conversations over months, but eventually one day you begin to realize that they understand what you're talking about. And we would start off with the very basics. I mean, when she was starting to count, we would show how you could count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you could use dollar bills for that. We would show that you would go to the grocery store and buy one special thing. That one special thing was our tactic to get good behavior in a grocery store. If you behaved, then at the end of the grocery trip, you could buy one special thing with the money that mom and dad gave you. And so she began to be aware. At first, it was just buying something. It had to be something healthy. She had to make choices. And eventually it became a question of, well, how much can I get for this $1 or $2 or whatever she was going to spend on that one special thing? And once you see that happening, then you're ready to start talking more about dollars and quarters and cents and pennies and how much things cost. And it just keeps going on and on over time. By the time she was in kindergarten, I can remember that, and she's told me the story many times, that the kindergarten had a machine where you could buy a pencil for 25 cents. And the machine would randomly spit out a pencil. So it was like a slot machine to a 5-year-old. You could put your money in there and you never knew what kind of a prize you were going to get. It was going to be an awesome pencil. And I think that sucked up probably $2 or $3 of her allowance every week for most of kindergarten and into first grade. So just making those choices with money, just using the money to make choices and get things. And you have enough money to make choices, but you don't have so much money that you can buy everything. And that's the whole important part about managing money early on, is learning to make those choices and understanding your feelings, especially if you make bad choices, right? That's how they learn to manage their money, is by making choices. And most of them will be bad choices. And they're always teachable moments. And as a parent, you're not going to sit there and say, see, I told you money doesn't grow on trees. Instead, you're going to ask those questions that talk about feelings and validation. How did that make you feel? What would you do differently if you were buying this toy again? Would you buy a different toy? What other things do you think you could change that would make this work out better? Those kinds of conversations are priceless. Those are the teachable moments that over those many, many conversations, until you feel like, you might be playing those conversations on autopilot. But eventually one day the kid or the older sibling and the younger sibling, however they work it out, suddenly there's understanding on that, and it's not a problem anymore, and they're ready to move on to the next step, and they're showing you that they're ready to move on to the next step.
So there's like so many just nuggets in there I want to bring attention back to. So first up, you encourage spending before saving.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's something that when I read that, I was like, this is it. This makes total sense, because I see so many other questions popping up, and I see other personalities talking about this, and they're like, oh, we're gonna teach this kids to save. When they get money, 30% spend, 30% save, 30% give. And I'm like, that sounds great in theory, but knowing myself as a kid and knowing what probably most kids would be like, they're going to totally rebel against the idea, because you are forcing them to do something with their money that should be theirs. So I love that in your book, you were kind of like, we're going to teach our kids to spend first. So like, let them spend it, let them blow their money on pencils and other plastic crap stuff that's going to be totally worthless. And as parents, you just kind of have to look at it and be like, I know this is a terrible decision, but I need to let them make that decision. And then you came in with the next golden nugget of exploring the kind of the aftermath of what happened. Like, so how did you feel about that purchase? Would you do it again? Was that a good buy? Did you get good value out of your money? And that's going to then build up to, I think, probably the next part where we start talking about how do you teach a kid to save?
Well, true. And they're going to internalize that conversation you have. As you keep asking them about their feelings, they're going to start realizing as they're out there shopping, Oh yeah, last time I bought this thing, I didn't feel very happy with it, and I'm not going to buy that again. But then the question becomes, well, what do you want to buy, and how can you get there? And so as they show that they're making better choices, or as they show that they're interested in getting bigger things, that's when you can start talking about saving money. Oh, you want to buy this toy that costs, $20. Well, you should probably save your money, and you could save your, how long do you think we could save your money if you get $2 a week? Let's count that up to $20. Wow, 10 weeks. That's like a quarter of a year to
A
you. That's a
lifetime
big part of
nearly.
your life. Right, right. Now, on the other hand, if you try to teach a kid to save by taking their birthday money or their presents over the holiday money, if you try to teach a kid to save by doing that, then all the kid learns from that is that the authorities have confiscated their assets. And as a kid, the only rational thing to do when your parents are acting crazy like that, as a kid, the only thing you can do is spend that money as fast as you get it. So by going through the rock bottom part where they spend all their money, and by talking about saving more money, and by talking about how to reach those goals, the things that they really want and want to spend more money on, that's how they begin to internalize the idea of saving. And now they're finally ready to go for that long-term goal of buying that really big toy. And again, it's a readiness question, but at some point you could say, while you're saving this money, if you were to put it in a savings account, we could pay you interest on your money. And every time you leave $1 in the bank of kid, we'll pay the interest on that money of a penny per dollar per month, or whatever it is. Maybe you want to bribe them with even more money. But now they know that they could put their money in some family kid's bank and earn more money, and they don't have to do anything. It just compounds there for free. This is an incredibly free thing to them, is getting more money for doing nothing except trusting the parents' bank with their money. Again, maybe this will finally take hold during early elementary school or later elementary school. It all depends on developmental readiness. And once they get that, well, now they know they can save their money, they can leave it there, they can get some free money on top of that money they're saving. And as they move along, and as they get even more interested in saving for that really big purchase, well, now you get into allowances and chores and jobs where you can earn extra money, right? It's all building on those conversations, those teachable moments where you find out whether they're ready for the next step and if they're interested.
Yeah. So before we dive into the allowance space, which is always such a fun one, just to kind of recap on a couple of things there. We want to build a saving habit. We want them to want to save. Like that's the key. That's the really hard part is, we can try and force ourselves to have a savings habit, or we can teach ourselves to enjoy saving. And the idea is that you encourage your kids to spend first. So what you've got, let's find something that you can actually afford with that money. Then you start saying, well, you're picking things that cost more than what you've got right now. How can we solve that problem? And they're like, okay, maybe I don't spend it this week, I save it. And I would say try and encourage them to pick things that might be 2 to 3 weeks of saving first, and then maybe 4 to 5, and then build it up. So like your kids are not setting themselves a goal of a year's worth of saving like straight away, because it's going to be very hard to stick to that. So small incremental goals, they're going to space out and get bigger and bigger. And I think you also said this in your book, but I want to come back to it, is when they do hit that savings goal, like offer them the opportunity to go buy the item, like still present that option. And if they say yes, go spend that money. And celebrate that moment, because they've achieved something really great that most adults still struggle with. Like they've managed to stay patient and save up for a goal. And we want that to be a celebration. We want this to be a very positive moment for the kids, so they begin to associate saving and achieving financial goals with, pleasurable moments, like that dopamine hit that we all chase for the things that make us happy and excited. Like we want that to be about saving too.
Exactly right.
And I love the idea of also including the additional incentive for saving with the bank of kids. So parents, like you can offer an astronomical interest rate compared to what a local bank will. You can open a custodial account, so you can do this with a bank. In the beginning, I do think it's better to keep your kids' money in the house and keep it physical where possible. So clear savings containers where they can see their money. If they're going to start dividing it into save and spend at this point, like we haven't even talked about giving yet, but at least like I've got a savings goal, and either I'm putting it all in there or I'm putting some of it in there, but let them see where their money is and how it's accumulating. And then Doug's idea is offer them an interest rate. So yours was what, a penny penny per dollar, so a 1% interest rate.
Right. Kids can't do percentages yet. So
Yeah.
a penny per dollar per month, 12% a year, right? I'd be all over that interest rate. And I've seen other authors of personal finance books who had even higher interest rates of 3 or 4 or 5 pennies per dollar per month.
Mhm.
The whole point is find what motivates your kid. If it works with a penny per dollar per month, then you're good. But if they're just not catching on, maybe the bank needs to do some economic incentives and raise interest rates.
And when the money is small, like maybe it does make
Yeah.
more sense to do something like even a penny per dollar per week. Like if you're paying,
Oh, yeah.
allowances or whatever it is on a weekly basis, like that could be your incentive to hold that money for the extra week. So that means parents, you're going to have rolls of quarters, pennies, nickels, dimes, like on hand if you want to do this. A big important thing, and again, this comes up in your book, which I just think is such an important point, is that you have to be consistent. You as the source of money or the bank or the employer, whatever way you want to kind of visualize yourself, like you need to be consistent with that paycheck. And that means having the cash on hand. Like if every week you're kind of like, ooh, I need to go to the bank or I need to go get change or whatever, and your kid's going to stop believing in this, especially if you miss a payment or something like that. They're going to stop buying into this idea and they're going to go do something else, or they're going to start hoarding their money.
What if you have a grown-up job and your boss gives you that attitude on payday? Oh, I don't really have $100 bill to give you right now, but I'll give you some on Monday. That doesn't work. You don't have any faith in the company or the banking system. And so if you have all this money available in exact change to give to the kids when they want in, if they know they can make a withdrawal from the bank of kid, and they're going to do that, they're going to test the integrity of the banking system and the solvency of it, then make sure you've got that money available. Sometimes all they want to do is hold it in their hands and say, okay, I got it. And then you can point out that if they put it back in, they'll get the interest again. So they'll test it. They'll want to understand the system and make sure they can trust it.
So now that's assuming that you are holding the money and not like they have it in their possession in a piggy bank of some sort. So like that they can make a withdrawal from you. Okay. And if you're going to do that, make sure there is the money available. If you're going to do something like a Go Henry or Green Light, where you're going to do a digital debit card for kids, where you're paying allowances from your bank account to theirs, it does allow you to be extremely consistent because digital transfers, as we know, are super easy to do compared to having cash. I never have cash anymore, but we need something visible for kids to see. And even like them being able to log into the app and see it is great, but I think having something even more physical makes sense. So printing out like a savings chart and just kind of showing like what's the actual dollar value in the account at all times, maybe having like a magnetic whiteboard on your fridge that could do the same thing. I've seen and I've heard of printing out physical currency. So like just print like a family dollar system or something like that. And like they can see the pieces of paper, and that represents money in real life as well. So there's an exchange rate, or it's a dollar for dollar value. So it's a very easy one, but just something physical that your kids can see, touch, feel, and confirm that they have this money, because as soon as it becomes digital, it's not real anymore for them. At least it needs to be more concrete. Okay. So let's go down the allowance route, because this is always a very fun question. Mr. Nordman, what is an allowance? Can you please define an allowance for me?
We're neutral on this. Every family is different. Every family has different values and different systems. And so we lay out the choices, and your family values, you'll pick what works for you from that menu of choices. So having said that, allowances are what we gave our daughter for being a good member of the family. Now, the subversive ulterior motive of our parenting tactic was to give our daughter enough money to go out and make those choices, and not enough money that she could go out there and be financially independent before she finished elementary school. We wanted to give her some money to be able to get familiar with managing the money and get familiar with all those feelings and have all those teachable moments and those discussions. So for somebody who's starting kindergarten, maybe you're only handing out $2 or $3 per week, whatever it takes for them to feel like they have money to make choices. And we never talked about what being a good member of the family was. We never listed a set of criteria for that. But essentially, the whole idea is to make them feel like they're a contributing member of the family and they get some money. Next, we move on to chores. And chores are what you do to keep the house a nice place to live, safe, clean. Everybody enjoys what they're doing there. You know, you don't have ants in your closet finding your sandwich that you left in there last week in your backpack, those kinds of things. So you have to do your chores just to be a nice place to live and to be a good member of the family, part of the allowance. And so if you're misbehaving, if you're having a bad week when you're challenging authority and doing all the rules, you're flouting all the rules, you still get your allowance because you're still a member of the family. But you can still have a loss of privileges if you're not doing your chores, right? If you're not doing your homework, or if you don't clean up, or if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you can lose other privileges, but you get your allowance every week no matter what. It's not contingent on good behavior. Instead, you remove mostly screen time, right? You take away electronics, you take away screen time. That was a very powerful tactic in the 1990s when we were raising our daughter, and I suspect it's only become more powerful today. So those are allowances and chores. And the whole reason that chores are in there for a precursor to the next step is to make sure their chores are done before they can earn more money with jobs. And the whole idea of jobs is if you are entrepreneurial and you want to save faster and you want to get more money, you got to work for it. And so you give the kid a choice. They don't have to do a job unless they really want more money. So there's another teachable moment. You wanted to save $20 for this toy and it'll take you 6 weeks, but if you do some jobs, maybe you could get that money in only 3 weeks. Oh, but first you have to do your chores. And that sets up a whole internal rules system. You're not the bad guy. You're just telling them what they have to do in the house to be a good member of the family, to keep it nice and clean and a place to live. And if you now want to be self-motivated and self-interested, you can go do some jobs. We always in our house had a car that needed washing. We almost always had something that you could clean that normally you wouldn't expect a kid to be cleaning. We also had things that you could learn actual skills on. If I was cleaning something out from under a sink, like a piece of plumbing, then I would offer to give my daughter a chance to earn money by helping me clean the plumbing. Now, ooh, that's disgusting. But sometimes you have to do those things to get paid the big bucks. And so we would have those conversations.
Yeah, I remember my dad, I think he probably was doing a little trial period on this, but he trialed out doing book reports. So
oh, I love that.
I had like I guess there was a reading incentive going on in school. And it was some program, I forget who was sponsoring it. It wasn't Burger King or any of those, but it was something like that. Like there was a national literacy incentive going on at the time. And I was in 5th grade. And we were able to pick up books, and depending on their length and difficulty level, they were coded. And if you read X number of books, you got like this tier award chart. And I think he liked the look of that. So he started implementing that once the program was over. And he was like, okay, if you complete a book that is reasonable for your age and reading level, and you write a short, I don't remember what the book report was, but he had like a Word document that I had to like fill out. I think it was like a summary of the book, my biggest learning takeaway from it or something like that. And if I completed that, that was worth something. So there was a dollar amount attached to it. So his way of trying to encourage me to want to read. Now, I don't know if it backfires or not, because you're kind of like chores. If we teach the lesson that you need to be paid to do these things, does it backfire in the end that you don't develop that internal, like, I need to maintain my own environment, or reading is something I should do for fun? I don't know, but I still love to read. So I don't think it ruined my love of reading in any way. And I liked that as an option to earn. And I've seen some people like, I'll take this even further, like you can go learn a usable skill. So like Outschool is a wonderful place to go if you want to learn how to do something. And you could say like, okay, take a class on Outschool, and we'll call that your professional development training. We'll pay you for that. So I think like with living outside of the 90s, like I grew up in the 90s too. I think Carol and I are very close in age. Those kind of options weren't there, but now there is so much learning available out there. And yes. There's so many things you could do, like whether it's watching an episode of the Discovery Channel or the History Channel and like, okay, give me a summary of what that was, or getting on YouTube and like you finding a video of someone learning how to do something and be like, okay, learn how to do this, whether it's graphic design or building a website or writing good copy or whatever it is. For the kids' age.
And that's very useful too, because at that age, maybe you'll have a natural reader, maybe there'll be a bookworm and they'll be tearing through the books in the library. Or maybe they just don't have an interest for books. Maybe they just want to read fiction books and they'd rather spend time on TikTok or YouTube or listen to an audio podcast. So you got to adapt
Oh
the
yeah.
thing that you're paying them for, the thing you're motivating them with, to their interest. I mean, maybe you've got a real hardcore reader. Yeah, book report will work great. And I'm just like you. I probably would have been all over those book reports.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that would necessarily have worked with our daughter. I remember that I used to throw books into her bedroom when she was a teenager, very, very important books like, Millionaire Next Door. And it wasn't until a decade later when we were writing our book together that she worked up the courage to say, all those books, Dad, never read them. And the point was that at that point in her life, she would have been much happier with videos and something audio form. She has read them today. She's gone back out of
Well,
some kind
yeah.
of parental guilt, and she's read them all. Right now, she's caught up, and she understands. But I learned something from that too, and we're going to do it different with our granddaughter, I'm sure. I'm seeing some questions in the chat. One of the questions that popped up was, what amount did you start with for
Yeah.
allowances and for all these other things? And again, it's whatever families are comfortable with. I think back in the mid 90s, we were giving our daughter a couple dollars a week up through kindergarten. And then as she got older, we started to give her a little bit more money. I think that by the time she was 7 or 8 years old, that she was getting $6 or $7 a week. And some of that was money that she was starting to actually save and invest. That's a story for later on. And again, make it age appropriate to your kid so that they have enough to make choices, but not so much that they can spend their money on anything. You don't want it to have runaway wealth in their piggy bank. And not every family is going to be able to spend this much money on your kid. I would point out, though, that you have to have the mental image of a kid taking a $20 bill, lighting it on fire, and running around the backyard like it's a sparkler on 4th of July. And that mental image is them making little mistakes with a little bit of money while they're little, instead of them making big mistakes with thousands of dollars when they're 24 years old. And as long as you make those little mistakes when they're young with money that you're going to spend on them anyway, they'll probably be much more responsible managers by the time they're teenagers, and you'll just avoid that nasty step where they're making big mistakes with expensive amounts of money.
And I think
there's another one here where we're talking about explaining frugality to your kids when they grow up trying to keep up with the Joneses. And again, one of the issues is you're giving them enough money to make some choices, so they can't keep up with the Joneses if they don't have that much money in their checking account or in their piggy bank. Another thing about frugality is just make the comparisons. I remember talking about Disney t-shirts, and we would go to the Disney store and you could buy a Disney t-shirt there for $25, or you could go to the thrift store and you could buy 5 Disney t-shirts for $20. And it didn't take long to understand the benefits of that.
And I think like going back to the amount, if you're starting your kids later, so say like you have a 10, 12, 15-year-old at home, just again, start with smaller amounts of money, let them learn with small amounts, let them show you that they're able to manage that small amount before you graduate them up to a bigger amount. So like if you have the luxury of starting your kid at 3, 4, 5 years old, then by the time they get into their teens, they probably are starting to handle bigger amounts of money. And again, going back to your book, Doug, like you talked about, like as Carol got older, you started saying, well, I'm going to spend this amount of money on your clothing anyway. So I'm just going to hand that to you and I'm going to let you manage that, which is a large sum of money, probably. I think you started doing it like quarterly and then eventually annually, that you were giving like here's your clothing allowance. Like basically, this is what we would have spent on clothing for you. You can manage it and you have to make it last. So once you're out of money for clothes, it's gone, like you're done. Same thing with electronics, same thing with whatever. Like you could start saying, okay, we would have spent this anyway. So it's not really you taking on any extra cost. In your head, you're like, you have to be like, okay, I'm just taking off my balance sheet and giving it to them.
You're gonna end up giving them that money one way or the other.
Yeah.
And if you give it to them now in monthly amounts and then start stretching it out quarterly, semi-annually, annually, you get rid of all the arguments. Instead of arguing about those jeans right there or that t-shirt right over there, you're going to give them the money for that month and say, I'm out. You can look really, really good. You can smell really, really good. Now you're going to have to make choices and compromises.
The only problem you're going to get is when you have a kid like me who refuse to spend their own money and they're in like rags and they're smelly and like, haha, your play, Dad. But just going on to Amanda's question again about the frugality, you probably had the same problem as well, where you and your wife were financially independent before your daughter left the home. So how do you raise a child in a household where the parents are doing okay? like we're not struggling for money. We've got extra. Maybe we are able to have a pretty decent lifestyle. Like, how do I teach my kid that they can't just kick back and be like, mom and dad got this? Which basketball player was it recently that's been trending? It's like, like my kids, like they get so angry because they say like, well, we're rich. And he's like, no, we're not rich. I'm rich. You're not rich. And
you don't expect to hear Shaquille O'Neal as a
that's
financial
it,
guru.
O'Neal, yes.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. We are rich and this money has to last us for the rest of our lives. You are poor and mom and I are going to manage this money for the rest of our lives so that when we're 82 years old and you're 60 years old, that you don't have to take care of mom and dad anymore. Now you've given them a motive for making sure that they're responsible custodians of the mom and dad money fund so that mom and dad don't end up depending on being supported by those kids as adults. And we joke about that, but I'm sure every kid has watched their parents be part of the sandwich generation where they're simultaneously raising a family and caring for elders. It's a situation where you do the best you can with the resources you have. And so you're not necessarily going to give them a certain amount of money at every age straight out of some advice book. Instead, you're going to look at what you would normally try to spend on that child in the first place and give them control over some of the money that you're spending anyway. And we found, I think, the sweet spot when she was a teenager for her clothing and toiletries fund was January and July, because January you had to plan for the summer, and July you had to plan for the holiday spending. There's another good question.
I see this great one coming up.
Yeah, the holiday spending one. That's a challenge. I think you're probably going to have a family budget for holiday gifts. That's what I would lay out.
Before you go any further, because I know anyone watching the replay won't be able to see the chat. This question came from Kelda. She asked, when kids want to buy holiday gifts for parents, siblings, maybe extended family, do you think parents should help pay for it, or should it always come out of their own savings? And then follow-up question was also about things like monthly cell phone plan, auto insurance. Like, at what point do you transition that to kids having to manage it? But it's holiday season. We're about to go into like that whole Black Friday craze, and then you've got the Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever holiday you celebrate that has a gift attached to it that might be coming up. How would you do that? Because I have some thoughts on this too, but I'll let you go first.
I would have a family discussion. This is the perfect example of a teachable moment where everybody can talk about everybody wants and everybody's needs and what kind of money you want to spend on that. And you can talk about how the kids felt when they had presents under the tree and how they felt about having a whole bunch of presents or just one or two or three special presents. You could talk about how other families would feel, cousins, siblings, neighbors, or kids who don't have any families at all. Do you want to raise some money for kids who don't necessarily have enough money in their families to have Christmas? Do you want to give some money to charity? And out of that discussion, you're going to set a budget. And it's probably more valuable to have the discussion with a firm budget number in mind and then just figure out how to divide that up than it would be to say, well, we're going to give everybody $25 worth of presents and then start multiplying from there. I mean, that pretty much builds up into a $2,000 holiday, which you probably didn't want to have.
Yeah.
So I would start with a defined figure and say, okay, guys, we've got $40 or $60 or $100, and we've got to share it among these many family members. And it's perfectly fine to talk about shared experiences instead of just spending money on each other. It's right. It's perfectly fine to talk about having a family night together or doing some special memory for the holidays that maybe you don't have to spend a lot of money on. It's just whatever your family values are, you'll try to transfer those to the kids through this discussion.
And I think I had this conversation with my high school seniors recently. So I teach a personal finance class in high school, and
hardcore.
The holidays brings up the question of traditions, cultural and family, what expectations are going to be when you go into relationships. And I was asking them, like, basically to examine what was already there and then what would they like to see in the future. So like when you eventually like start having a long-term partner, like that's an opportunity to kind of reset all the traditions that you want to for at least your own family. You have to kind of like maybe argue or what's the word, barter with your own family. Yeah. But you get to decide like what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. So like my wife and I, we have kind of broken some of the traditions that were there beforehand. We started doing things like her sisters will do a shared experience together instead of getting gifts for each other.
Oh, nice.
Our friend group when I first started dating my wife, like, so I basically adopted all of her friends because I'm not from the area. They were all buying gifts for each other. And, you know, you're talking like 20 something year olds. So like the gifts are kind of almost getting up to close to $50 each. Like it was a very expensive holiday. And, you know, the math person is kind of like, well, if you're going to give me something worth $50, I'm going to give you something worth $50. Can we just call it even and not do it? But you can't voice those thoughts aloud because that's a very unpopular opinion. So what got proposed eventually, which we all love doing now, is we adopt a local family where money is tight. And I think it's like Christmas Angels or something is what the program's called. But essentially, like you adopt this unknown, in our case, little girl. I think she's 7 years old, and we get told what her likes are, what her sizes are for clothing. So there's like clothing items, and then there's a toy as well. And like, you know, that's something that we're making sure our son is seeing us do. And like, we're making very clear, like, hey, we give at this time of year as well. But
you could also take that budget, whatever your amount is that your family is going to put toward that holiday, and tell the kids, this is the amount of money that we have for that holiday that we're going to spend on this list of people. And if you want to spend more than that on a certain person for a certain reason, then it's time to spend some of your own money. And now they've got to make choices. How do they feel about this relationship? Is that just a sentiment, or is that a real commitment? If we're going to have to spend our own money, that's a completely different level of involvement than just divvying up mom and dad's budget.
And I liked what you said as well about, if we're going to do this, and going back to Kelda's question, like where my kid wants to buy gifts for siblings, for parents, like if you're starting out and obviously they don't have a lot of money for themselves, like you can say, like, let's do a split on this. Like, how much are you willing to put into gifts? We'll 3x that or whatever it is. And that's your gift budget. Yeah. So you have to decide, like, okay, nice. You've got this amount of money to manage. You get to make your choices and how much each person gets and who is on your list, but that's it. This is your gift budget. I think it's a great opportunity to let kids practice managing money, which is what this is all about. The allowance thing, giving them other opportunities to earn. Like, this is about giving your kids as many opportunities as possible to manage money, make mistakes in a lot of cases, but to learn to manage with smaller amounts of money. So I think that's an option as well. And then going into part two of this question, like the monthly costs, like cell phone and auto insurance, I think also brings up the opposite end of the allowance question, is when do I stop giving it? And I think your answer in your book was like, when my kid basically has the opportunity to earn enough that they can cover their own costs, like they don't need help from mom and dad anymore. Would that be your answer for the cell phone and auto insurance as well? Like that if they're old enough to be earning, that's when that becomes their expense?
One of the most disastrous mistakes we made in the book was holding the line on the cell phone, because to us, a cell phone was a business tool. And to us, it also seemed like a toy for a teenager. It didn't seem like it was a necessary aspect of their life. And we were totally wrong. When our daughter got her age 14 work permit from the state and went out and got herself a job, with her very first paycheck from her very first hour of employment, she went out and bought herself a cell phone. And that's when we understood. That's the first time we comprehended that she needed that to keep up with the group for study groups, for teachers' tutoring sessions, for the school projects. I mean, there was a lot of socializing going on, but there's also a lot of important school information that was getting sent around by text and by cell phone. And if she didn't get in that loop, then she was always missing out. And we're, as parents, older generation, we were very slow to appreciate that. The funny part was that once she got that cell phone for herself, our home landline, the phone stopped ringing. So that was a hint. So I would say that a cell phone is, again, if families can afford it, it's an educational tool. Now, it doesn't need to be an iPhone 13. It could be an old iPhone 5 or even a clamshell, something that they could get minimal bandwidth and some standard of communications on, and a good starter one to learn from, so that they don't have to worry if they happen to drop it into a puddle on the way to school. But I would say that probably all the way up through college, that they're going to be using that heavily in the classroom as well. Now, in high school, you're probably told to put your cell phone away and not to bring it out. But in college, you're using that phone on a tripod to video the class. You're using it to record the audio of the teacher talking. You're maybe looking things up on that phone during the class. It's a very valuable learning tool. So if
I think you have a very optimistic view of what kids are doing in college, but I'll give it.
I do, and some of that is depending on what kind of education your child is studying. But you're absolutely right. You start with if they show up for class. Now, we had a whole a whole routine with the college fund too, was that if you didn't show up for class, you were costing money from the college fund, and the profit sharing was lower. But that's an advanced concept for another discussion.
Yeah.
And you're right. I do have a rosy optimism over what our daughter was doing in college, but I'm pretty sure that unlike her father, she was probably showing up for all these classes sober. So, we've got that standard established. But car insurance is another option. If a family needs transportation and you have to pay an extra premium on insurance for a teen driver, well, maybe you're not going to be able to do that for a while. Maybe it's worth doing because you want them to get some driving skills. On the other hand, if the family budget won't allow it, then they're going to be using a bicycle or taking rides with others for a long time. And that's another good discussion point about where the compromises are going to be made in their allowance, their money, their savings from their jobs, and the family money. If you happen to be well enough off to afford for paying insurance for a teen, or some states will not let you raise insurance rates for teen drivers just because that's the state law. Hawaii was one of those states where we never had to pay a high insurance rate for having a teen driver. And so if you are fortunate enough and have enough wealth to afford that kind of a lifestyle, then if they can learn to drive under your supervision and do all the driving if possible, well, now you've given them a chance to go out there and earn extra money because they're mobile.
Yeah.
I'll also point out, we've seen the statistics. Gen Z has among the lowest driving rates of any generation since Henry Ford invented the automobile. So maybe they're not interested in driving a car.
Yeah, I mean, you question like what the needs are
right.
for the car. I mean, like myself and Carol's age, like a car was the way like you got to see your friends. I mean, social media was just starting to become a thing then. Cell phones, of course, was a great way to socialize, but it wasn't the same. Like now there's just so much more like technology available, I think, that are connecting kids without them having to leave the home. I would add in on this cell phone question. I like what Doug said. I think having your kid on your cell phone plan gives you a bit more control if the cell phone is being abused. So from a teacher perspective, I like it when parents have a say in how the cell phone is used and have the ability to shut it off if they need to. B, I would say whatever the, I guess, base level that your kid needs to survive, like the need level, if you're covering that as a family, that sounds great. If your kid wants extra data, if they want unlimited calls, text, and that's not part of your basic plan and that's extra, then that's the part I would ask your kid to cover. So like, you're in contact with us, you're never going to be lost. You're never going to be stranded, like, because we have this base level phone set up. But if you want more, it's going to be something that comes out of your own pocket, because you'll have Wi-Fi in school, you'll have Wi-Fi at home. So if you need data, that's your extra thing. You're going to pay for that.
On a practical level, we had a couple other tips from families as we were going through this stage of our lives. One mother would tell her kids that she would pay for their cell phone bill, but they had to respond to her texts within 15 minutes. I don't know, speaking as a young adult, I don't know if I'd like to live under that world, but that was the rule. And that's what you got free cell phone service for, was on a 15-minute leash to your mother. We told Carol that we had a budget in the college fund, and that if there was money left over after she graduated, then there would be profit sharing from that fund. And the whole point was that if she was a responsible custodian of that fund, then when she graduated, there'd be more money in the fund for profit sharing. And that meant that you didn't buy the new iPhone every semester, and you didn't buy upgraded service and extra bandwidth and all the bells and whistles, because when you graduated, you wanted to have more money available in the college fund. And we did the same thing like you're about to talk about with insurance.
Yeah, just kind of the same idea, like that. If you're going to have cars being involved, like, are you going to help them pay for it or not? Is it something they have to cover themselves? If you're saying like, well, for my parents, I got my first car when I was going to college. So I was in college before I bought my first car. Before that, I was able to drive my dad's car the occasional time, but I was taking a bus. So I went to college. I was in Ireland, by the way. So I was going to college an hour and 20 minutes away, and I would take the bus every weekend. And that bus was probably about $20 a week for the round trip. And what they basically said was, if you're going to get your own car, we'll give you the money that we were paying for the bus, because that was an expense they were covering at that time. So again, just kind of reallocating the funds, like we were spending this anyway. If you want to upgrade your life to a car, here's the money to do, like, that we would have given you anyway, but the rest of it's all you. And I think that was a fair argument for me. I went out and bought like one of the cheapest cars I could. I was very conscious of the money I was spending on gas, because gas in Ireland was
Right.
notoriously expensive as well. So it's like
Right.
the cost of owning a car is so much cheaper here than it is in Europe. Um, so it forced me, because I was covering at least part of that expense, or the above and beyond part of the expense, that yeah, I was more frugal with it. College expenses, kind of same thing. Like I had an allowance, I guess, for being in college at the time, because my ability to work was limited. And they were kind of like, well, when that's gone, you better start dipping into your own money, because we gave you enough to cover your food. We gave you enough to cover your day-to-day stuff. Like, so if you're partying the money away or whatever like that, like you're going to either go hungry or you're going to have to find a way to pay for it yourself. So I think
Make choices.
that was fair. Yeah. It was like, we give you enough to manage. And then if you want more, it's on you.
I would also point out that car insurance companies do give discounts for good grades. They give
Yes.
discounts for student driver education. They give discounts for that little dongle that you attach to the OBD2 port on a car to keep aware of your location and your driving technique. There are many ways to make driving affordable, to make the insurance affordable. And you could even make sure that they're responsible for the first $100 of damage if it comes to that, of any incidents, and there would be a loss of driving privileges.
Little kid deductible. I love it. And then you got to have that conversation of, well, do you have that $100 in a savings account somewhere? Is that emergency fund somewhere in place? And same thing with a cell phone.
Great discussion,
like,
right?
yeah, we'll give you the cost of buying a clamshell phone if you break it. So if you want something better, you better make sure you've got a little emergency fund stashed away for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things that I want to get to before we finish up.
Wow, time is flying here.
I know, it's like we're at
Sorry,
8:56.
folks.
I'm trying to pick my questions here because I'm like, I have so many.
The next time he does this on Kickstarter, we're going to go for a 2-hour webinar.
And we'll do this again at some point, because I love talking
Okay.
to Doug, and Doug's a wonderful guest. He's great for coming on and talking to us. Choosify Foundation, which I work for part-time, is also a wonderful source for these sorts of webinars. And we typically do a bunch of these over the summer. So keep an eye out on my page and Choosify Foundation's page for that. I guess I'm going to leave it as an open-ended one, Doug, because given the time we have left, what else would you say is like one of your best tips for parents to kind of help them raise a responsible money manager that we haven't discussed already? And I'll give you a second to think about it if you need to.
No.
Okay.
I can't overstate the importance of having the conversations. And every year you're going to have a new conversation about a new teachable moment. I mean, sometimes your kids will feed you a line where they'll make some horrible mistake with money, and you'll have a chance to have a discussion about that. But the point is to keep having these conversations and have everybody in your family comfortable talking about money. I'm one of those kids who grew up in a family where money was just never discussed. It wasn't a proper topic for social engagement. And as a result, I managed to get all the way into my 20s blissfully ignorant about managing to save and invest. And so you may be having a discussion about buying pencils with a kindergartner. You may be having a discussion about cell phones with a young teen, but you want to have them comfortable and engaged and interested in those conversations so that when they get out of college and get that job and they have something called a 401k, they have to figure out what to do with that. You want them to be very comfortable at calling up mom and dad. And by then, ideally, they'd also, instead of asking you a question like, should I invest in a 401k? The question will be more about, what kind of choices do I have for funds? What are my expense ratios? And what's my asset allocation? So just keep having those conversations as much as you can. And I found it very productive to have these conversations by also reviewing all the things that I screwed up when I was that age. And that way you let them know that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them. They also look at you and say, wow, if he could reach financial independence with all that list of mistakes I've gotten from him, it's clear that it's not as hard as it looks. How difficult could it be to get financially independent before dad? So those lines of communication are the real reason that you're sharing the money in your budget and giving them the money to manage and then teaching them about saving and investing, is to keep those discussions going, because one day you're going to be old enough that your older adult children are going to be making all those financial decisions for you when you're in your 70s, your 80s, your 90s. And teach them well. And ideally, it will work out at both ends of your life.
And I think that's great stuff. And I want to just kind of add to it from the teacher perspective. So I'm in a slightly different role with my students because I don't get to always be there for them. I think everything you said about like being an open line of communication, being a safe space for your kids to come to with their successes, So like we're the biggest cheerleaders, we're the biggest fans when they do something right and they've made a great financial decision, they've saved, they've bought a long-term savings goal, or they've earned scholarship money, whatever it is. Like those are great moments. Celebrate them, by all means, celebrate them. But when they make a mistake, when they screw up, when they have a purchase that really did not go well, they bought something really cheap, they didn't buy quality, whatever it is, they crashed the car and now it's a big expense. Like it needs to be a safe space that they can come to you and tell you these things. And they're not like, there's no judgment involved. Like you can, of course,
good word.
You can model like anger, disappointment, whatever it is, but you have to be able to come back and say like, okay, that happens. Like, how do we feel about that? What do we learn it from that? Like, and it has to be a place where they can come to you and share those mistakes, because that's what we need. Is we need people who feel comfortable and not ashamed, embarrassed, this taboo topic of money, that they don't feel like they can talk to anyone about it. So from a teacher perspective, I'm also trying to equip my students with as many different sources of knowledge as possible, because I know I will not always be that source of knowledge. So let them, we talk about these things, right? Encourage them to read, encourage them to research questions when they have them, listen to podcasts, look at YouTube videos, like include people on their social media feeds that are providing good financial information. Like that's a wonderful way, by the way, to just surround yourself with better influence, and influencers is probably the word we're looking for, but surround yourself with people who are doing better with money than you are, so that you can start learning from them, just even through osmosis. And by doing that, you're equipping lifelong learners, and you're also equipping kids who are going to turn into adults who will be able to find an answer when they have a question, and they'll be able to find it whatever way they feel comfortable with. So even if they don't feel like coming to a family member because it's super embarrassing, or it involves that family member, or whatever it is, they'll have a place to go to find answers, and they'll be equipped to do that.
Exactly.
All right. It's 9:01. So we've hit the hour, and I think that was a great closing note. I know I promised a lot of giveaways. I have not forgotten about them in the slightest. The issue I came up with is that there was no way to actually export the people who are on this call or the people who registered until the event is over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the event. I'm going to do all the drawings myself. I'll record them probably tomorrow, and I'll post those via email to everyone who is here and everyone who registered. So if you're watching the replay or you were live, I will make sure that you are included in the emails about who won those. And then if it's something that's physical, I will email you and try and get your address so that I can send you your books. Or I have a Super Money Kids saver box, which I just need to show everyone, because do you know what I'm talking about?
No, but I bet it's an incentive. It's concrete, right?
It's this like thing from Courtney Hale. So he runs a company called Super Money Kids, and it's this spend, save, share box, and it comes with all these lessons as well. The things open up. They are not clear, which is something that I would maybe disagree with on a slight sense, but like Courtney is doing awesome stuff in the personal finance world, and he's generously offered one of these to one of our viewers tonight. So I definitely want to get that out to you.
I love it.
So yeah, be on the lookout for that one. And then I have a couple other books as well. But thank you everyone who attended tonight. Doug, where can people find you if they want to hear more of your amazing wisdom?
Well, I'm on the Choose FI groups, of course, on Facebook. You can also find me at themilitaryguide.com. Just search my name too, Doug Nordman. I've been doing this long enough now that I'll come up on the first page of Google search results.
SEO.
And that's right. That's just persistence more than anything else. So that's the easiest way to find me. I'm also on Twitter as The Military Guy.
We didn't even touch on that like you have a military background and all that stuff. So I know Veterans Day just passed. Thank you so much for your service.
Oh, well, thanks for the support. And it's all about families and financial literacy.
And Matt just brought up in the comments again, your book is awesome. Highly recommend it. It's one of the things we will be giving out tonight as well. So that is Raising Your Money Savvy Family for Next Generation Financial Independence. And you can find that anywhere books are sold pretty much. So wait for the giveaway just in case you get your free copy. But after that, check it out on Amazon, check it out on Bookshop, Barnes & Noble, Target. You can go to choosefi.com and find it there, because like The Simple Startup, which is my first book, that was published through ChooseFi Publishing. So you can find a link to purchase it there at choosefi.com.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Feel free to reach out to either of us. We would love to hear from you. If you had any big takeaways from tonight, we'd love to hear that. When you get the replay link, feel free to share that beyond just this email group. Like this can go out to anyone who you think might benefit from it. All right. Have a great night, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody.